5,000 years ago, before anyone wrote down a poem, a prayer, or the name of a king, someone wrote down a tax receipt. Barley, 37 months, 29,086 measures. The oldest written sentences on earth are not stories, they are receipts. And behind every receipt stood a man whose job was to track every single bushel of grain in the known world. This is how he did it, and why you still live inside the system he built. Picture the city of Uruk in what is now southern Iraq 5,000 years ago. It is one of the first true cities on Earth. 40,000 people packed inside mud brick walls. And rising above the rooftops stands the most important building in the world. Not a palace, not a temple, a granary. Inside it, grain, mountains of it, enough barley to feed a city through drought, siege, and failed harvest. This was the world's first central bank, and its currency was not gold, because you cannot eat gold. Barley was better. Every measure of it was worth the same as every other measure. You could split it into a single day's meal, or pile it into a year's wages. And everyone, from the king to the lowest laborer, needed it to stay alive. But grain has a fatal flaw. It rots. Let moisture in, and mold turns a fortune into black sludge. Rats and weevils drink a granary dry from the inside. Even healthy grain quietly breathes, losing weight month after month as it sits. So the granary became a fortress. Raised floors against the damp, thick sealed walls against thieves, and narrow openings at the top where every single scoop, in or out, could be watched and measured. Because when your treasury can rot, spill, or be eaten, counting it is not bookkeeping. It is survival. Now comes the hard part, harvest season. Thousands of farmers owe the temple a share of their crop. Meet one of them. He works a small barley plot beside the canal, and this year he owes the temple 5 sacks of grain. He delivers 3 now, and promises 2 more after the flood. Now multiply that little debt by 10,000 farmers, across 10,000 fields, year after year, with no writing, no numbers, no paper. How do you remember who paid? Memory fades, farmers argue, officials steal. The temple needed a record that could not be argued with. The answer had been sitting in the riverbank all along. Clay. For thousands of years, villagers across the Near East had pinched wet clay into little shapes. A cone stood for a small measure of grain. A sphere stood for a larger one. One token, one thing, no reading required. Hand the temple 3 sacks, and the clerk sets aside 3 tokens. The pile of clay is the account. You can check it with your eyes, or count it with your fingers. But a loose pile of tokens has a problem. Anyone can add one. Anyone can quietly pocket one. So a little over 5,000 years ago, some clerk in Mesopotamia had one of the greatest ideas in human history. He took the tokens recording a farmer's debt and sealed them inside a hollow ball of clay. Archaeologists call it a bulla, a clay envelope. To change the record now, you must smash it open in front of witnesses. The debt is tamper-proof. It is the same logic as a blockchain. Do not trust the man, trust the sealed record. 5,000 years before anyone said the word crypto. But there is an obvious flaw. The record is now invisible. To check the debt, you have to break the seal. So clerks began pressing the tokens into the soft outer surface before sealing them inside. 3 cones within, 3 cone marks on the outside. And then, somewhere along the way, someone realized the beautiful, obvious truth. If the marks on the outside tell you everything, you do not need the tokens at all. Flatten the ball into a tablet. Press the marks into it. Congratulations, you have just invented writing. Which brings us to the man standing at the center of this story, the scribe. He has trained since childhood, copying signs into wet clay until his hand ached. Signs for the things that mattered: barley, sheep, oil, beer, debt. On intake day, he sits at the granary gate with the official measuring jar. In Sumer, the basic unit was the sila, roughly 1 liter, about 1 day's food for 1 worker. Scoop, level, tip, count. Every sack a farmer brings is poured through that official jar. Not the farmer's jar, not the overseer's jar, the temple's jar. Standard measures meant a bushel in one village equaled a bushel in the next, and cheating the jar meant cheating the gods themselves. But how do you sign a document in a world with no signatures? You wear your identity on a string around your neck, the cylinder seal. A small stone barrel carved with a tiny scene so intricate that no 2 were ever alike. Roll it across wet clay, and it prints an endless band of pictures. Your pictures. It was a fingerprint you could wear. Officials rolled their seals across tablets to approve them, across the clay stoppers of jars, and across the wet clay plastered over the peg that locked the granary door. Open that door, and the ceiling shatters. And the broken pieces, still carrying the officer's mark, were gathered up and counted. Even the act of opening a room left a paper trail, made of clay. And the scribes themselves? Oh, they were watched too. Around 4,000 years ago, under the kings of Ur, this bureaucracy reached a level of detail that still frightens modern accountants. One set of records tracked what came in at the gate. Another tracked what flowed out as rations. And at the end of the year, auditors merged them into a single balanced account. What was expected on one side, what was delivered on the other. And any difference became somebody's problem. If a foreman's account came up short, the deficit did not vanish. It followed him, year after year, as a personal debt to the state. These scribes recorded dead sheep, jars of spoiled beer, a single missing scoop of flour. And when one overseer died still owing the state, officials could claim what he left behind to settle the balance. Death was not an escape from the books. Death was an audit. So why go to all this trouble? Because whoever counts the grain controls everyone who eats it. That mountain of barley flowed back out of the granary as daily rations, ladled out under the scribe's watchful eye. A working man received roughly 2 sila of barley a day, women and children less. Rations paid the men who dug the canals, the soldiers, the weavers, the priests. In Egypt, even the pyramid builders were paid in bread and beer. Grain in edible form. Call it the ledger-to-lip pipeline. Every calorie between the harvest and a worker's mouth passed through an accountant's records. Feed people, and they will build your temples. Withhold the ration, and hunger does your policing for you. The granary was never just a bank, it was a throne. And nowhere was that throne taller than in Egypt. Each year the Nile flooded, and stone staircases called nilometers measured exactly how high the water rose. A good flood meant a good harvest, so officials read the water level and set the year's taxes before a single seed touched the ground. Surveyors stretched knotted cords across every field. Scribes recorded every plot, every farmer, every expected sack of grain. The bureaucratic gaze turned an entire river valley into one giant taxable spreadsheet. And if a farmer came up short? On the walls of one scribe's tomb, painted 34 centuries ago, the penalty is shown in careful detail. A farmer who failed to deliver, beaten in front of the record keepers. The scribes did not carry swords. They carried lists. The lists were enough, which brings us back to that very first tax receipt. On one clay tablet from Uruk, a scribe totaled an enormous flow of barley, 29,086 measures received over 37 months. And then, at the bottom, he signed it. Kushim, the first personal name in recorded history. Not a king, not a warrior, not a poet or a prophet. As far as we can tell, an accountant. A man counting barley. Scholars still debate whether Kushim was one person or the title of an office. But either way, humanity's first recorded name sits at the bottom of a grain receipt. And the system never died. It only changed its clothes. Clay tokens became notched tally sticks. Tally sticks became paper ledgers. And ledgers became the spreadsheet glowing on your screen. England's treasury kept its tax records on wooden tally sticks for over 600 years. And when the old sticks were finally burned in 1834, the fire escaped the furnaces and burned down Parliament. Today, the granary is a server farm. The bula is a checksum. The cylinder seal is your password. And the fear is exactly the same, that somewhere, quietly, the record and the reality have drifted apart. And here is the strange part. Writing, mathematics, the calendar, the census. So much of what we call civilization began as tools for counting other people's grain. The scribe at the granary gate was not trying to invent literature. He was trying to stop barley from leaking. But once humans learned to trap a number in clay, we never stopped. We counted grain, then land, then hours, then heartbeats. You live inside the descendants of his ledger. Every paycheck, every tax return, every database row with your name on it. 5,000 years later, the counting has never stopped. It simply ran out of grain and moved on to us.